Yes, at cruising altitude, no passenger can open an airplane door, and the reason is pure physics. At 35,000 feet, the cabin is pressurized to roughly 8 pounds per square inch above the thin outside air. That pushes on every door with about 100 pounds of force per square foot, more than 20,000 pounds, over 10 tons, pressing it shut. The handle turns, but the door will not move. So why do people still try? And what happens when they do? Every few months, somewhere in the world, a flight makes the news for the wrong reason. A passenger stands mid-air, walks to an exit, and wraps a hand around the door handle. Cabin crew move fast. Other passengers pile in. The captain declares a diversion, and the plane drops into the nearest airport while the person is restrained. Airlines train for this precisely because it keeps happening. The numbers back that up. In 2021, the FAA logged a record 5,981 reports of unruly passengers, and in the most alarming cases, crews have had to duct tape a thrashing flyer to their seat after they lunged for an exit door mid-cabin. What makes these moments so frightening is that the handle is right there, not hidden behind a panel or locked in a cockpit. It sits in plain view, at roughly eye level, and when a determined person grabs it, it turns. It moves with almost no resistance. Nothing about the feel of it whispers impossible. That is the trap the design accidentally sets. It offers just enough motion to make the next inch feel inevitable. But the next inch never arrives. In the entire history of commercial jet aviation, no passenger has ever pulled a cabin door open at cruising altitude. Not once. People have screamed at these doors, braced their feet, thrown their whole body backward, recruited strangers to help. The door has not shifted a hair. To understand why a handle that turns leads nowhere, you have to leave the cabin and look at the sky pressing in on it. At cruise, there is barely any sky left to breathe. Climb to 35,000 feet, and the atmosphere is thinned to about 3.5 pounds per square inch, roughly a quarter of the pressure at sea level. The air molecules are so spread out that your lungs, built to pull oxygen from thick low air, find almost nothing to work with. A human being cannot survive out there unaided. So the aircraft performs a quiet deception on your body for your benefit. Compressors bleed air off the engines, condition it, and pump it into the sealed fuselage until the interior sits near the pressure you would feel at about 8,000 feet, close to 11 pounds per square inch. High enough to breathe without thinking, comfortable enough to doze off. You feel as though you are resting in a mountain village, not hurtling through the stratosphere 7 miles up. The newest jets soften the trick even further. Boeing's 787 Dreamliner, built from carbon fiber composite instead of aluminum, holds the cabin at the equivalent of just 6,000 feet, a full 2,000 feet lower than the older jets around it, which is part of why long-haul passengers step off a Dreamliner feeling noticeably less wrung out. Take that manufactured pressure away, even for a moment, and the countdown is merciless. At cruising altitude, your useful consciousness, the window in which you can still reason, unbuckle, reach for a mask, is only 15 to 30 seconds. After that, thought blurs and the body quietly shuts the lights off, often before any pain registers. And that clock runs faster the higher you climb. At 40,000 feet, useful consciousness can collapse to about 15 seconds, while down at 25,000 feet you might still have 3 to 5 minutes. The danger is not theoretical. On June 10, 1990, a windscreen blew out of a British Airways BAC 1-11 over southern England and hurled the captain, Tim Lancaster, halfway through the hole. A flight attendant gripped his legs for 20 minutes while the co-pilot landed the jet, and Lancaster somehow survived. Pressurization is not a comfort feature. It is the thin, invisible wall between an ordinary flight and a cabin full of people who can no longer save themselves. And that wall is what pins the door shut. Its power comes down to a single act of subtraction. Inside the cabin, about 11 pounds pressing on every square inch. Outside, in the thin high air, only about 3.5. The inside pushes outward. The outside pushes back far more weakly, and the gap between them, the net force straining against the aircraft skin, comes out to roughly 8 pounds on every square inch. That number, 8, is the entire drama. Engineers call it the pressure differential, and the whole airplane is designed around respecting it. Many airliners are certified to withstand a maximum differential of about 8.6 pounds per square inch before relief valves bleed the excess away. At cruise, the jet lives just below that ceiling, near a steady 8. Everything that follows is that 8 magnified. 8 pounds on a single square inch sounds trivial, about the weight of a small bag of sugar on a spot the size of a postage stamp. You could push it back with a thumb. If a cabin door were that small, a child could open one at altitude. But a door is not a postage stamp. It is a vast field of square inches, thousands side by side, everyone shoved outward with that same 8 pounds at the same instant. The arithmetic stops being gentle almost immediately. Spread that 8 pounds across a single square foot, a patch about the size of a floor tile, and you are already looking at roughly 152 pounds of outward force. More than half a ton bearing down on an area you could cover with a seat cushion. Now think about the whole door. A typical cabin door covers around 21 square feet of that pressurized skin. Multiply the force on 1 square foot by 21, and the total outward push sails past 20,000 pounds, more than 10 tons of steady, silent force leaning on a single door for every second at altitude. 10 tons is hard to feel in the abstract, so make it flesh. Picture a full-grown bull elephant standing on that door, now set a second elephant on top of the first. That stacked weight is what a passenger would have to overcome with 2 hands and a handle rated for a gentle indoor latch. Framed like that, the fear looks almost quaint. And the physics is not finished because the cruelest trick is hidden in the shape of the door. None of this design was born from caution alone. It was written in tragedy. Rewind to the 3rd of March, 1974, and Turkish Airlines Flight 981. The warning had arrived nearly 2 years earlier. On the 12th of June, 1972, American Airlines Flight 96, another DC-10, lost the same cargo door over Windsor, Ontario. Captain Bryce McCormick nursed the crippled jet back to Detroit, and every soul aboard lived. Weeks after that, a conveyor engineer named Dan Applegate put his fear in writing, warning in a now famous memo that the door would one day open in flight and kill a plane load of people. The fix was left voluntary, and on this particular airframe it was never fully made. Shortly after takeoff from Paris, a rear cargo door on the DC-10 failed. A baggage handler named Mohammed Mahmoudi had latched that door on the ground. The warning placard was printed in English and Turkish, neither of which he could read. The latch was faulty, and critically, that cargo door opened outward, not inward like a plug. It was not sealed by pressure. It was fighting pressure. When that latch let go, the result was catastrophic. The door tore away, and the cabin's trapped pressure blew out in an explosive decompression. The floor above the cargo hold collapsed, severing control cables, and the aircraft dropped into a forest north of Paris. That forest was the Forêt d'Ermenonville, and the DC-10 struck it barely 77 seconds after the door gave way, traveling near 430 miles an hour. 6 passengers, still strapped to a broken section of cabin floor, were later found in a turnip field more than 9 miles from the main wreckage, ejected the instant the fuselage let go. All 346 people aboard died. The dead came from more than 20 countries, among them a large group of British travelers stranded onto that flight by a rail strike back home. At the time, it was the deadliest crash in aviation history, and it forced a hard reckoning across the industry. Outward opening doors and weak latches could kill everyone in seconds. The answer was to lean fully into pressure-sealed, inward-pulling plug doors to make the physics itself the lock. The handle you felt turn so easily only ever released the internal latches, the small catches that keep the door aligned in normal operation. It was never engineered to move the door against pressure, because no one expected it to have to. You can crank that handle to its stop and back all day long. Behind it, the plug stays fused to its frame by nothing more mysterious than the ordinary air filling the cabin. And engineers, unwilling to lean on physics alone, stacked another layer of protection on top. Sound engineering never trusts a single safeguard. Modern airliners are fitted with pressure-sensing interlocks, mechanisms that detect when the cabin is pressurized and physically prevent the door from being worked at all. The door does not just resist opening, it is barred from even trying. The operating procedure follows the same logic. Before any door can open normally, the crew must first disarm it, and cabin pressure has to be equalized with the air outside. Only when inside and outside sit at the same value does the plug relax enough to move. Until then, the mechanism declines to cooperate, no matter who is pulling. Some exits go further and lock electronically once the aircraft passes a set altitude, so the option of opening vanishes as the plane climbs into cruise. Stack it all up, and the door is guarded three ways at once: by raw pressure, by the geometry of the plug, and by the locks and interlocks bolted around it. Which leaves one honest question. If doors are sealed this thoroughly, how do they ever open at all? Both disasters taught the same lesson from opposite directions. The pressure inside a cabin is enormous, and a door or panel that fails will be thrown outward with terrifying violence. That is why the modern rule is so strict, and why the accident that terrified the world in 2024 proves the rule rather than breaking it. On the 5th of January 2024, Alaska Airlines Flight 1282 was climbing out of Portland when a piece of the aircraft blew off at about 16,000 feet. Headlines said a door had come off a plane. The reality was more precise and more reassuring. What failed on that Boeing 737 MAX 9 was a door plug, a panel that fills an unused emergency exit position, bolted permanently in place. The jet, registration N704AL, was barely 10 weeks old and was carrying 171 passengers and 6 crew toward Ontario, California. Unsettlingly, its cabin pressure warning light had illuminated on 3 earlier flights that same week, and Alaska had already quietly barred the aircraft from long over-water routes to Hawaii, pending a maintenance check. The panel that blew out fell into the backyard of a Portland school teacher, who handed it to investigators days later. 2 passengers' phones were swept out at 16,000 feet and were later found on the ground with their screens intact and still working. It is not a door anyone operates. There is no handle, no latch a passenger could reach. Investigators found the cause, and it was chillingly simple. 4 retaining bolts, meant to hold that plug in place, were missing. The fuselage had been built by Spirit Aerosystems in Wichita, Kansas, and shipped to Boeing's plant in Renton, Washington, where workers had reopened the plug to repair damaged rivets nearby, then closed it again without putting the 4 bolts back, and no paperwork ever recorded that the plug had been opened at all. Without them, cabin pressure did what it always tries to do. It pushed the panel outward until it left the airplane. But notice what did not happen. No passenger opened anything. The system worked as designed everywhere except the factory, where the bolts were never reinstalled. And despite the terror of a hole opening at 16,000 feet, there were no fatalities. Everyone came home. The morning after the blowout, the Federal Aviation Administration grounded all 171 MAX 9 jets of that configuration worldwide, and the NTSB chair, Jennifer Homendy, told reporters how fortunate it was that the 2 seats right beside the plug had been empty when it left the aircraft. The failure was a manufacturing defect, not a flaw in the physics. It was the aircraft itself shedding a piece of its own body. On January 5, 2024, a door plug tore loose from a Boeing 737 MAX 9 minutes after takeoff. This is the event every anxious flyer now reaches for, the picture that seems to break the entire argument. A gaping hole punched in the side of a jet, high in the air, with people strapped in just feet away. The airplane had just climbed out of Portland and was passing roughly 16,000 feet when the panel blew outward into the darkness. Freezing wind tore through the cabin. Loose phones, a headrest, clothing, all dragged toward the opening and out into the night. It was precisely the scenario passengers picture when their eyes drift toward an exit and their stomach tightens. Alaska Airlines Flight 1282 was bound for Ontario, California, with 171 passengers and 6 crew aboard. The 2 seats right beside the hole, 26A and 26B, happened to be empty. A teenage boy in the next row had his shirt pulled clean off his body and out into the sky. The plug itself came to rest in the backyard of a Portland schoolteacher named Bob Sauer, who found it among his trees 2 days later, while 2 phones sucked out at 16,000 feet were recovered on the ground below, one of them still unlocked and working. But look closely at what took place. Nobody touched a handle. No passenger opened, forced, or reached for that door. The panel left on its own, driven outward by the very cabin pressure this story has been describing. Which flips the real question. The mystery is not whether pressure can overpower a door. It is why this one panel failed when countless millions of others, on countless millions of flights, never have. It comes down to a detail with nothing to do with the strength of the seal and everything to do with human hands on the ground. When investigators from the NTSB pulled the aircraft apart, they found that 4 bolts meant to fix the door plug in place were missing. The panel had, in effect, never been fastened down at all. The jet was barely 10 weeks old, delivered that November. Within hours, the FAA grounded all 171 Boeing 737 MAX 9 aircraft flying that same door plug configuration across the United States, and inspectors soon turned up loose or missing bolts on other planes as well. It also let go at roughly 16,000 feet, where the pressure differential is meaningfully lower than at full cruise. And still, even under that reduced load, an unbolted plug could not stay put. The outward force that normally seals a door tight had nothing solid to press against, because the hardware that pins the plug into its frame was absent. Pressure did what pressure always does. There was just nothing holding the panel to receive it. This is the point that gets lost in the noise and the alarming photographs. The pressure was never beaten. It was never even challenged. A door plug bolted incorrectly is held shut by the exact same physics as every other door on the airplane. The same 8 pounds per square inch, the same wedging plug. Alaska 1282 was not evidence that pressure can fail you. It was evidence of what happens when human assembly does. And that carries us right back to your seat, your hand hovering near a handle. Now the answer lands clean and total. At cruising altitude, a passenger cannot open a cabin door. Not for lack of nerve, not for lack of effort, but because the raw numbers render it, flatly, physically impossible. And it only turns more hopeless the higher the aircraft flies. The more the plane climbs, the thinner the outside air grows. The wider the differential stretches, the more fiercely the door is crushed into its frame. The holding force does not fade with altitude. It intensifies. Cruise is the strongest that seal will ever be, the worst possible moment to try. So the handle turns and nothing follows, because the handle was never the true obstacle. The plug geometry is. To open that door, you would have to draw a panel wider than its own opening inward, through tons of unrelenting pressure, then thread it back out, a motion physically impossible while the plane is pressurized and flying. There is no hidden technique, no surge of adrenaline, no combination of strength that rewrites it. And buried inside that impossibility is a genuine comfort, the very thing passengers fear most. The pressure bearing down on the walls around them is the exact thing holding the door sealed and keeping everyone safely inside. That same 8 pounds per square inch that sounds so violent out loud is the lock itself. It is not menacing the cabin, it is what holds the cabin together. Across billions of flights and decades of jet travel, no passenger has ever opened a door at cruise, for the simplest reason of all, it was never a weakness. Pressurization is a safety feature wearing the costume of a fear. The invisible wall that lets you breathe at 7 miles up is the identical wall that will not let the door so much as twitch. Cabin pressure seals the door shut, so the next time your eyes catch that exit and a small worry stirs, remember what is happening on the other side of it. More than 10 tons of quiet physics are working in your favor, gripping the door tighter the higher you climb. The handle may turn, but the door stays exactly where it is, and you land safely every single time. If this finally put to rest a fear you have carried onto every flight, follow along for more of the hidden physics quietly keeping you safe while you never notice it.